Okay, here we are again, back for another third-party repair podcast. Ricky, it's been a while, and I've missed doing this. I just want to say it's great to be back here, and I'm really excited to have another chat to you. How's it going?
Tim, it's really good to hear your voice again. It's been far too long, but this new COVID world that we live in, we've both been crazy busy, so it's hard to fit everything in. But yeah, it's good to be back together, and hopefully we can do this more regularly.
Exactly. We've taken a few notes here just prior to this conversation. We haven't spoken. This is largely us just live, just getting back into it again. And we've taken a bunch of notes here on what we want to talk about today. So let's just get straight into it, eh?
Yeah, cool.
Okay, so here we go. So first one we want to talk about is, as much as we probably really do need to talk about it, which is the fact that, COVID has been a thing for quite some time now, and the implications of that in our industry. Over there, you were talking a bit before about how that's been for you, and we were sort of comparing the fact that we're having quite different experiences. So why don't you start with how that's been going over your neck of the woods?
Yeah, so even though we were doing a podcast before and we were doing it through COVID, I think we did really well to completely stay away from the subject. But it's clearly going on for quite a while now, so it's not something that we can ignore. So COVID, with our retail in COVID, it's been really quite challenging here in the UK. We've been locked down multiple times, and depending on your council, we do repairs. So as long as you're doing repairs, you are classed as an essential service. So you can stay open, but you also have to be very careful with having people in your store. And I mean, these policies have changed over the year, and every lockdown it seems to be different. And regardless of the data that's coming out about positive COVID cases and deaths, we just seem to be constantly looking at new lockdowns, which isn't great. So it's been challenging with retail. With B2B and with insurance, it's been slightly different. That's been quite consistent and okay, because people still need their stuff fixed. But how does that compare to you? I mean, you're the other side of the world in Australia. You're dealing with the same virus. How does that compare to you?
Yeah, well, also Australia's a big country, so even here across the various sort of centres of the country, it varies quite a lot. But generally, where I am, it's a fine example of a lack of COVID. We haven't had a COVID case here in my city for, I can't even remember. It's so long now. I feel kind of bad saying that, given that your experience has been quite different. But I do want to, I'll play that guy who contrasts with you so that people can sort of find that point of interest. But Australia's done pretty well. We've had problems in Melbourne, if anywhere at all. But compared to the rest of the world, it's small.
So are you when you go to work every day now? Do you all have to wear masks? Do you have to social distance? Any of that stuff, or is it all gone?
So I would say, if there was a government official listening to this conversation, I would say yes, there's things that we are actively doing, which is in certain places you'll find an X on a seat that marks where you should be sitting, that's 1.5 meters away from someone else, with another X on that seat. But it's little tiny things like that. I've not seen a person wearing a mask. I can't remember the last time I saw someone wearing a mask at all.
Wow.
So yeah, there's no masks. So to give people an idea, there's no masks. There's no, people aren't even talking about it at all, really. We're talking about all other issues that we have in our town that are, as every town has, and none of them really relate back to COVID anymore. They might be more a case of maybe tourism is down and compared to what it was because of other areas of the world experiencing COVID, but nothing on a local level that's actually affecting us firsthand, our health or anything like that. So
Wow.
We're pretty lucky. And yeah, I feel really blessed actually compared to what you guys are experiencing over there. I mean, the vaccine, should we get into any of that? But is that something that's going to change things, do you think, in your opinion, or are we going to be?
I don't want to go too. I don't want to go too deep with the vaccine. We'll be here all day. But we're doing
right.
Here. I mean, you sound like you're much more normal than we are, and hopefully we can get there sometime soon. But they're doing a really amazing job of rolling out the vaccine here very quickly, very successfully with very little problem. So I'm really hoping that as that continues to roll out, we can get back towards some type of normality that the dream you're describing to me sounds like. But yeah, hopefully we'll
it's
get
there.
Anyway, COVID done. Should we move on to
it's hopefully not too far in the instance.
Should we move on to
Yeah.
some repair
So the
stuff?
next thing, that's a good point. So recently there's been an announcement. I think it's over your way more than here, but something similar to the Apple independent repair program, but now from another OEM in Samsung. Is that something that's going to change things, or how does that compare? What can we discuss there?
Yeah, so a few months ago, I was on YouTube and I got sent a link by a friend to a YouTube video from Batteries Plus Bulbs in the USA. It was on their YouTube channel, and it was about 6 minutes long, and it was a really well produced video, and it was explaining how they were the first member of Samsung's new, I think it's ISP, not IRP, Independent Service Provider program, which is separate to their authorized repairer program. It's a new program which sounds very similar to Apple's independent repair program, IRP. Anyway, I watched this video and I just thought, wow, that's really interesting that they're following Apple there. And then the next day the video got pulled down. It disappeared. And I was telling people about it and you couldn't find any information about it. And I was telling people in Europe and they were speaking to their Samsung representatives and no one knew anything about this. And I felt like I had gone crazy seeing this video that not many people had seen. But yeah, recently the WISE certification and Batteries Plus Bulbs and Samsung have put out a press release explaining that I'll just read a little excerpt here from the WISE certification post on it, which is Batteries Plus Bulbs technicians are individually certified through the Wireless Industry Service Excellence WISE program from CTIA, the Wireless Industry Trade Association. And what this means is that Batteries Plus Bulbs, after gaining this certification from WISE, are the first Samsung independent service providers in the United States of America. So it's not quite my way, it's in the USA. And you must remember that in the USA, they don't have... They don't have regular access to service pack parts. It's a much different market to Europe. So what I see from Samsung here is they're copying Apple with Apple's independent repair program, the IRP. And I'd imagine, although Batteries Plus Bulbs are the first to be certified, I would imagine you've got to remember Batteries Plus Bulbs is a franchise in the USA, and there are other repair franchise stores which I would imagine will be in very late negotiation stages to join this. And I would not be surprised at all if independent third-party repair shops and technicians had the opportunity to join this in the near future as well, as it grows and as it gets a more stable foundation. And I'd imagine it would just mimic the IRP model with Samsung.
Do we know much about what this WISE program is? This sounds like it was already there. Wireless Industry Service Excellence.
It is, and CTIA, without going into too much detail, and it's probably a chat for another day, but CTIA are not very supportive of right to repair. So it is very interesting that the body that are putting together the training package for the manufacturers are not supportive of right to repair.
Do we know why they're not supportive of right to repair? Can you speculate on why that would be? I mean, I don't see why anyone would have a problem with the fundamental sort of energy of what that's all about. It must be something else, I assume.
I don't believe that right to repair is in the manufacturer's best interests. They want the best repair services for their end clients, for their customers, for their end users, and they need an element of control over that to do that. And I think that by them working with CTIA, I think that gives them the platform to be able to dictate that control in a way that they'd be happy to supply parts to authorized repair shops. I think it's just one. I think it's an interesting one. I think we need to watch how it plays out. But if it follows IRP, I'd imagine it would be quite successful quite quickly, and it is good for end users to get more repair options, more good repair options.
Do you think there's any chance that any of the independent, so just touching on this while we're here, that any of the independent repair program or this ISP from Samsung, do you think that any of that is likely at any point in the future? Can you see a day where possibly the authorized side of things is wound down and looked at as being some sort of old school thing, and instead we live in a world where the independent repair side of thing actually, so the line between the two is blurred, and it just becomes, rather than something that's independent or authorized, but instead actually these two communities can actually all work together. I mean, do you think that would be ideal, or do you think that's not necessarily a good thing?
If Wise or CTIA or Apple or Samsung or any other manufacturers had an open communication line with independent third-party repairers, shops, technicians, to discuss bugs, problems, repair techniques, processes, that would be absolutely amazing. But I don't think we're anywhere near that at the moment. The trump card they've got is, as per our previous episode, which is still completely accurate as of today, is serialization. That is their trump card. And there's very little although we've got some things to discuss here, there is very little that anyone without access to the IoT side of the repair process from the authorized side, the Internet of Things, so with the web connected stuff, if you haven't got access to that, it doesn't matter how good you are, or how good your processes are, or how good your processes are, or your parts are. None of that really matters when serialization is at play. So, I mean, the future, who knows what will happen. I dream of a future where they can work closely together, and things like repair calibration tools are opened up for access to end users as well as repair technicians. But we're far from there at the moment, and I think the manufacturers are making a play for this whole authorized network type thing, and we've just got to watch how that plays out and see how successful it is. But it really, I mean, it's not even that bad. Although serialization, I think, is fundamentally bad, I don't think having authorized repair networks in the way that they're doing them is terrible. They just don't need to be as closed as they are. They don't need to be as secretive as they are.
If we're going to play a bit of devil's advocate, we'll hang here for a while. If we're going to play the devil's advocate...
You're keeping me here. You don't want to move on from this.
Oh, no, I just think it's worth it. I mean, at the end of the day, this is... it. I mean, I think you and I can both agree on it's probably one of the most important...
Not only most important
things too. Yeah, it is. It really, it is. Everything else is almost peripheral, and this is what it's all become all about. If we're going to play devil's advocate a little bit, I think we have mentioned this before, but I guess we'll touch on it again, which is if you owned, sorry, let's say that you worked at an OEM, and your goal here, let's say, was to provide people with quality and reliable, safe, I guess we'll throw in there too, repairs. I don't know if I just said quality, but I'll throw that in there again if I hadn't. Then, and someone has purchased a device from you, and part of them purchasing that device from you, the OEM company, is to also provide these, assume that they will make accessible, reliable, quality repairs. Maybe it's not that easy as just going, okay, here's all the parts and here's all the manuals on how to do this. Anyone who wants to do it. It's not that simple, is it? Because you'd have to have some degree of control over making sure that is happening to some way, shape or form.
They have this.
It's hard. How do you even make that happen?
They have this. So you need processes. You need processes. You need parts that follow the processes. You need tools. You need equipment. They have all of this stuff. And if you become authorized, you get access to it. But what they're doing by not giving access to the non-authorized independent third-party repairers, they're not sharing that information with them for them to give the manufacturer's own customer, the end user. They will not get, I'll say, as good of an experience, because if none of us have seen the authorized documentation, then we're just going blind and do the best that we can. There is no reason really why they can't make that documentation, that information available to everyone. If they did, all that would happen is the end users, their own customers, could potentially get a better service, and it may even be that independent third-party repairers that are not authorized can look at this, these processes, these parts, and they might even be able to come up with better ways of doing them. Because as good as this documentation and this information is, they're made by humans, and I mean, we're always learning with the design of these devices and with their parts. You look at the design changes from generation to generation, and I mean that's one of the most amazing things for repair for me is looking at, you get a new phone that comes out and you tear it down, you have a look at it, and you're like, oh, they've changed the flex cable from the charge port. Rather than going under there, it's now going over the top of there. They've moved the battery to there. They've done this. They've made the camera now, so you don't need to remove the logic board to remove the camera. And all of that, you look at it, and the whole there are designers there, and their specific job is to design these parts and these phones so that they're more repairable. It just feels, if I'm one of these people that are making these design changes and putting together these documents, these process documents, I would be infuriated that they were being hid behind a lock and key for only authorized shops needlessly.
Yeah.
That would infuriate me. If I went to work every day just to make these design changes and put these documents together, it would infuriate me that the whole world was not seeing these when the whole world should see them, because then everyone wins. Everyone wins.
Is any of that intellectual? Does that fall into the category of intellectual property, though? How does that work?
Well, I mean, if it's their document and they don't want to share it, then yeah, it's intellectual property, which is fine. They can do that. I can create a document and not allow people to share it and hide it behind NDAs and that type of thing. But what I'm saying is, you've got, I mean, I don't even know the count of iPhone owners in the world. Tens of millions, hundreds of millions.
It's got to be.
You put this documentation out there, everyone wins. End users read it. They know what to expect of their repair technician. They know what to expect of the person handling their device, whether they're authorized or not. It shouldn't be used as a stepping stone to try and get people for repair shops to become authorized and for end users to use authorized repair technicians. And I know enough independent, non-authorized third-party repair technicians to know there are some absolutely amazing brains in this industry. And I am sure that if they had half an hour to look at a process document from a manufacturer and had the specifications of things, they could mimic everything that a manufacturer does outside of being authorized. And the only winner there is everyone wins. End user, better service for the repair technician. At the moment, it's just being used to try and force people to be authorized. And that's all of that is without touching on the serialization stuff and the calibration, web-connected IoT tools.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. Okay, beautiful. Should we move on from that?
Yeah, and it moves on to a nice little piece, which is Mr. Louis Rossmann, who has a YouTube channel. He's probably the most well-known repair shop owner or repair technician from electronics in the world. And if you're a repair technician or a repair shop owner and you don't know who Louis Rossmann is, just if you get on YouTube and you search anything repair related, you'll find him quite quickly. And what I love about Louis is that he doesn't pander to anyone. He is strong in his values. He doesn't pander to anyone, and he says things how it is. And he uses his YouTube channel. He's quite hard to reach away from YouTube, but he uses his YouTube channel as a platform to get what he thinks out of his head. And what he thinks in his head is often what we're all thinking, but he's just getting on YouTube and saying it to over 1 million people. And it's quite refreshing watching his videos. And I can't imagine he makes many friends in the CTIA wise manufacturer world. But what is interesting is he has got
what's going on with him.
Yeah, so he's recently got some quite serious support with his views on the preservation of independent third-party repair. He's got some quite serious support of it, and I'm expecting to see some movement with that in the next few days, weeks, months. And for him to get some serious support is really good for everyone, authorized, not authorized, everyone, end users. If he can make some progress with this, it would be really good. Now, the reason I say that is if you
can you touch on it? Can you touch on a bit on what you mean when you say serious support? Is it financial? Is it what is this? Is it someone wanting to? What is it exactly?
For years, Louis has supported an official organisation that has pushed repair. I'll use the term right to repair, and he has supported that and he has pushed that, and it's made very slow progress. And what we learned with the iPhone 12 camera, the iPhone 12 when it launched, the camera, Mr. Hugh Jeffreys from Australia, he swap the parts on the cameras. I've actually got a little part to play in this, and I'll say it in this podcast. I haven't said it before. So he was speaking to Rico, who we had on here before, Federico Server, and he said, I've swapped all the parts and they work absolutely fine. There's no issues whatsoever. Now, I had prior knowledge of the camera issue. So I said, Rico told me, and I said, no, Rico, tell him to go back, tell him to test the camera, and tell him to test the camera. And the cameras now have like portrait mode, panoramic, all the different modes. I said, tell him to test those modes, because what they're going to do is they're going to hide it in a different mode. Anyway, Rico fed it back to Mr. Hugh Jeffries. Mr. Hugh Jeffries went back. He tested the camera in different modes, and it didn't work. The camera it stopped functioning. So that was because the serial number of the camera didn't match the uniquely calibrated serial to the logic board. It disabled it. So what Mr. Hugh Jeffries did was, Mr. Hugh Jeffries put out a video just literally showcasing this issue, that's exactly the angle that I've been trying to get. I'm going to get the YouTube video up to see what views it's on now, but it was on a ridiculous count. Show off camera, YouTube.
While you do that, what has happened with that? Has been an update release that solved that problem?
Sorry. Before 9.7 million views that YouTube video was.
Was it really?
9.7 million views in 4 months, and it reached over 1 million within days, I believe. So because I strongly believe, because Mr. Hugh Jeffries put this video onto YouTube, which cost him little to nothing to actually do. He just produces quite nice videos, and he's got a nice little voice in him. He did that. 9.7 million views. Apple then updated iOS, and with the iOS update, you can now swap the cameras, and they work, so the functionality is there. But now it comes up with the unable to confirm whether this camera is genuine notification, which is the same that they've done with the displays and the same that they've done with the batteries. It was like a, damn, you caught us, but take that instead type of move from them, which was it's not really needed, doesn't really benefit anyone. But anyway, just from Mr. Hugh Jeffries doing this YouTube video, he managed to get that fixed by Apple. So he's actually made more progress than some.
That's unreal.
He's made more progress with one YouTube video than some repair organisations have made in years of lobbying and years of court action and spending tens of thousands of dollars and whatever currency you want to spend it in. He made more progress with one YouTube video.
You'll catch me on from one day to the next, and one day I'll be wearing my. I mean, it's not really a tinfoil hat, but I'll definitely be saying that someone's at headquarters there intentionally doing all of this. And then the next day I'll just think, you know what? No, they are their own independent company, and they have far loftier goals and things that they're focusing on than worrying about any of that. And if it doesn't get brought to their attention somehow, then it's not going to change. And it could just be that rather than someone there going, you caught us out. All right, we'll backtrack a little bit and we'll downgrade this from non-operational to notification territory.
Whoa.
Instead,
you just contradicted yourself.
Hang on, I haven't finished. What do you mean?
Sorry, you just contradicted yourself.
I was going to...
Yeah. Let me just say, you said they don't know about it unless they're told about it. But then they downgraded it from non-functional to notification. But if they didn't know about it, then they didn't downgrade it. They fixed the bug. And when they fixed... That's why I said it was like a ha-ha type thing. Because when they fixed the bug, then they thought, right, we'll fix that bug. But because there was a bug there, and now you've got 9.7 million views on your YouTube video, which don't make us look very good. Here, have that notification instead.
Yeah, so what you're saying, it's a little bit of it's probably a possible combination of both of what I was getting at there. So. Yeah. I think it usually is, right? It's usually a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B. So I'd say that's what it is.
But earlier I said about an open communication line with the manufacturers.
Yes.
Which would be amazing. Yeah. YouTube video doesn't need to happen. If there's an open communication line between independent third-party repairers and manufacturers, that YouTube video with 9.7 million views, which doesn't make the manufacturer look very good, didn't need to happen. That wouldn't happen again.
I mean, and there's always the one thing I cannot get past is if you're going to put a notification that and you have all the best intentions in the world of informing your customers that they may not have a genuine part inside of their phone, then surely if you're going to do that, you've got to at the same time make it possible for them to fill the demand for those repairs across the entire world, I guess, because Apple's an international company. And given that we've discussed this before, there's just, I would find it very hard to believe that an authorized service chain of theirs could possibly fulfill that. And if they could, you'd think that they would be already, and therefore these notifications would be irrelevant and wouldn't even exist, and there'd be no point in putting them, because all that would exist would be authorized repairs in their world. You would think that this would all be happening, and you would think that they would go ahead and do all this, but because they don't, it's a little bit cheeky, isn't it? If to say the best, that you're going to put up a notification that says, yeah, well, we know that you're going to try and get it fixed elsewhere, and we know we're not going to actually, bring that level of supply to the market. But we'll just put a notification there to help you out. It's like, well, how about you just sell the parts? How about you just sell the parts outside of your own authorized supply chain, which then you've got to assume that if you're just going to make more money from selling parts. You're going to then, I assume, make available all of the manuals on how to be safe when you're doing it, and how to make sure you're offering bring it back to an OEM quality when anyone's doing it themselves. You're going to make all that available. It's going to be intellectual property, sure, but you'll freely give that out because you want you want to make sure that it's actually all these parts that you're selling are actually getting installed correctly. So it still doesn't add up. It's not okay.
I've said since day one that the actual notification, what it says and what it does, is flawed. It's lazy coding and it's flawed. When it says it's unable to confirm if the display is genuine, or it's unable to confirm if the camera is genuine, that's a lie. It's not unable to confirm. It's not checking. It knows, Apple know, any manufacturer knows, every single serial number of every single part, which is on every single component, every single unique serial. This phone that I'm speaking to you on now, they know the serial number of every component in that phone, and they match it with the serial number of the logic board. They know every component that should be there. Now, if I go and buy 2 phones from the manufacturer and I swap the cameras over, that phone that is web connected can sure as hell check whether the serial number of the new camera that has been put in matches an original camera serial number. It could even go as far as to check whether that serial number has been duplicated and spoofed and written to multiple cameras, if that's even possible, so that if it's being used more than once, then it could show a different type of notification. But it doesn't. It makes no attempt to even try any of that. As soon as it's not the one uniquely authorized, proprietary calibrated camera or display that is paired with that one logic board, as soon as it's not that one, it says it's unable to confirm whether it's genuine. Now, the truth is, it hasn't checked. The truth is, it's not the originally calibrated part. It makes no actual attempt to confirm whether it's genuine or not. So what the
is that because I'm not a coder? Can I just jump in? I'm not a coder, but I mean, I would imagine if I'm going to write code that has to check between a database of all serial numbers in possible existence that have been programmed out of any phone, and then checking with the actual logic board with whatever came on it originally, it's going to be a lot easier to do the latter, right?
Well, there's a lot of easier things to do with code, but I mean, we're talking about the biggest company in the world here, and I mean, if to look at the purpose,
and it would also have to do that in a web connected sense. You would have to do that through some sort of restore process, right?
Could do it through the same way. I mean, it could do it through the boot check. It does it when it boots. That's when it phones home and it checks these things. There's nothing stopping it doing it properly. But to look at the purpose of these notifications and to look at why they're there, when the notification comes up, if you click learn more and it takes you to the link, it's a whole web page on the cameras, on the displays, and long story short, it's telling you to go to an authorized service provider. So in my view, the notification is there in the first place to put doubt and uncertainty in the end user's mind, in the hope that they would then go to an authorized repair provider. Now, a lot of independent, non-authorized repair shops and repair technicians, they'll have a conversation with their customer, and or the end user that's come for a repair, and they'll explain this to them. And 9 times out of 10, the end user will not care. They will not be too bothered about it. But what this is doing, as each generation with this happens, more and more components, they're coding IOS to do this. What's happening is the trust between non-authorized independent third-party repair and the end client gets eroded. With every little one of these, it gets eroded to the point you're going to get notifications for absolutely everything. And before, people could make parallels between this and the automotive industry, which went through this a few decades ago, I believe. But now they're going through this again with Tesla and the web connected cars, and they're going through the same thing again that we're going through now. And the trifecta that we went through in a previous episode is giving the manufacturers an upper hand of it all. And on this, this feeds quite nicely into the next point. But on this, I'd just like to say, and it's something I want to expand on in the future, our two-factor codes on our iPhones, they're good enough to store our health data behind. They're good enough to store our financial information behind. They're good enough to store all the pictures of our family, our kids, everything behind. They're good enough to store all of our contacts behind. They're good enough to store everything behind. As soon as you can do that two-factor code, you can have access to everything you've got stored on your phone, which is everything in your life. Why are they not safe and secure enough to store calibrating my own phone to a new display behind? Why, as an end user, can I not open an app? Why is there not an app I can open and use my two-factor code that was good enough to store all my personal information behind? Why is that not safe and secure enough to then calibrate a new camera on my phone? Why is that not
the
safe
best
and secure
I've got?
enough to do
As if you want me to answer that as best I can, again, devil's advocate, I'll be that guy. It's going to be something along the lines of making sure that everything is being done to ensure that there's no way that a dodgy repair can take place.
Yeah, but
it's a quick, easy way to make sure that that's the case. If I owned Apple,
keeping this child friendly,
it's a quick, easy way.
Yeah, but
you know
keeping this child friendly, running a desktop app with it connected compared to running an app, it's crap. They can make an app. They can make an app that's safe and secure. I've got an app where I can open my bank account and I can see I've got an app where I can open my health and I can see how many calories I burned yesterday. I've got an app where I can turn my lights on at home and my lights off at home. I've got an app for absolutely everything. You're telling me that they can't make an app to recalibrate a screen to my phone? You're telling me that they can't make the owner of that whole operating system can't make an app safe and secure enough to do that, but the apps that contain my banking data and my health data, all of my contacts, but they've put pictures of my kids, they're all safe enough. But you're telling me that...
Oh, okay, so sorry. Right. So possibly not the calibration side of things.
No, I'm saying devil's advocate, you're spot on. You're spot on with
Yeah.
what you're saying. But what I'm saying is, that is crap. Whilst they're hiding everything else behind apps, everything else in my life is safe behind a two-factor protected app. It's crap to say that for safety and security, we're going to hide that behind only authorised technicians can do it, running it on a MacBook. No.
Yeah.
That's rubbish. That's not safe and secure. That is hiding stuff behind an authorized network because you want an authorized network that you can control. At least be honest about it. It's not safe and secure.
I think there's pros and cons. There's yin and yang or whatever you say to both the OEM side of the industry, of the repair industry, and then also our side of the independent side of the industry. And wouldn't it be great if there was a way to... There's got to be a way that the best in both sides can combine into one place to provide all of those quality repairs that any decent person wants their phone fixed would obviously want. There's got to be a place for that to happen, a space, should I say, for that to happen, that doesn't involve what seems like could be sneaky, convenient serialization and calibration processes from the OEM, and then also that doesn't involve sneaky and dodgy, I would say dodgy mechanic style, you don't know what's going on under the hood there when I work on it style, independent repairers, which exist, obviously. And so if there was a way that could be ruled out and still independents were able to provide all of that for their customers that Apple would obviously want, then I don't see why that can't happen. I don't see why that's not happening, other than and maybe a genuine disinterest in people who sell phones wanting them to ever be repaired because that would affect their bottom line. Yeah, that's the only...
I'd completely agree. And an open communication line would between real independent third-party repair technicians, not CTIA, real independent repair technicians, and the manufacturers would be beneficial for everyone and mostly the end users, because they would get a better service. Now this feeds nicely onto the next point. So we just completely rallied over that 12 camera issue without actually explaining what the 12 camera issue was properly. So Mr. Hugh Jeffrey's video was 2 phones, swap the cameras. The cameras are uniquely serialized. The phone, the same as the Touch ID that we spoke about in the Trifecta episode before, it looks for, when it boots, it looks for the right serial number of the components. If it doesn't find the right serial number of the components, it can throw up errors, or it can like notifications, or it can not function. They can do whatever they want with it. It doesn't have to be on boot. They can do it through use. With the 12 camera on launch, they did it so that the cameras wouldn't work. It looked like a bug. When they fixed it, they introduced a notification saying unable to confirm whether this camera is genuine or not. Now, in the aftermarket space, so aftermarket screens are not made by the manufacturer. They are made by third parties, not authorized, and they are not made to the specifications of authorized original parts. They are made to function, and they take power from other places. They pass data through other lines. A great example would be they've made LCD screens that fit onto the iPhones that take OLED screens. LCD screens have backlights, so they're taking the power lines to power the backlights from the logic board, which was never designed to power a backlight. So they're taking power from somewhere on the logic board, which was never designed to pass that amount of power to a display. That is aftermarket. There's an aftermarket touch panel type now for the iPhone 11 and up, which are the displays which show the unable to confirm whether this is a genuine display or not notification. There are now aftermarket display types that, as of iOS 14.4, disable, they make it not show up the notification at all. So you can buy, it's actually the cheapest panels, the cheap ones. You can buy a cheap aftermarket panel and you will not get a notification to say unable to confirm whether this screen is genuine or not. It will not show it, which would then insinuate that the display is a genuine one, although it would be really quite obvious to anyone with a little bit of care over the parts that they use that it was an aftermarket part. However, as of iOS 14.4, if you take a refurbished or a pulled screen that was taken from an original phone that was fully working, and then you put it on another iPhone, not the uniquely calibrated one, it would still show the notification. So we're actually in a situation as of iOS 14.4 where you're, as a non-authorized third-party repair technician, if you use the cheap rubbish parts, your customer will not be notified that your screen may not be a genuine one. But if you do use a pulled genuine part, your customer will inaccurately get a notification to insinuate that you've used a fake copy part.
Wow.
Which kind of highlights just how inaccurate and flawed the whole notification system in iOS that they've built is, and how the only real purpose of it is to try and push the end user to sow a seed of doubt in the non-authorized technician, and to try and push them into an authorized repair network.
So you'd have to think that this is just an oversight from Apple, though. You think that they would, as soon as they found that out, they would just write some code to make sure that those real dodgy screens also show the notification now. That's the only difference here. They just missed something, surely. It's not like they've done on purpose.
So my mobile centrics in America, we make a point here of not talking about companies or anything like that, which I really like that we do that. But I've got to give some props here to mobile centrics, because I've been calling for transparency from wholesalers for years, just to put out information and data on what's going on in the supply chain, how the repair shops were affected, so that they can then inform their end customers. And yeah, so they put out it was last week, I believe, they put out a load of information about a load of parts that they're selling, and information. So like they were sourcing PS5 HDMI ports, and they turned out to be PS4s, and how they're rectifying that. And then they put out, this is the only real information we've had on the iPhone 11 genuine display message, and I'll read it out. It says, the claim of displays of a particular supplier that they do not show the non-genuine display message is somewhat false, as all aftermarket displays do not show the message on iOS 14 because of a hiccup in Apple's software. The message does show up on aftermarket displays because Apple's software forgot to recognize the code 00000 example, when no display serial in the IC is embedded. However, if the display is a refurbished display, then the message would show up as the code is still registered in Apple's database for a different original device, hence why a non-genuine display message shows up for refurbished displays. If aftermarket assembly manufacturers embedded a serial number that is associated with an original serial number, then the message shows up.
So there's no code that basically checks whether or not there's a serial number or not. It's just saying, is the serial number the same as the one that was there before? And if there's not one, then it just somehow is. It's just it doesn't trigger whatever would have triggered the notification.
Yeah, that insinuates a bug. But what is interesting from reading that is the True Tone software function on your display. So it's some little gimmick that they put into their MacBooks and iPhones now, and it changes the color tones of the display based on the light around you. You need the correct serial number for the True Tone to show up. But what these aftermarket displays that do not show the genuine notification are doing is they are still showing they're still showing True Tone. So I don't know if True Tone works from a different serial than this one is looking for, but it does. If this is accurate, the information they've put out is accurate, and they are quite a trustworthy source, then it's just literally as of iOS 14, it's not actually checking whether there's a serial or not, which seems like a ridiculous oversight. And it goes back to open communication lines. We could have fed this back to them quite a while ago, and it could have been fixed with iOS 14.4.1. When I say fixed, they could have made it show the notification again if they chose to. But yeah, as of 44, I'm expecting with an iOS update, I'm expecting Apple to patch this, so it will do that check, and any displays that have been replaced previously would then show the notification. So it's not really a selling point for any repair shops or repair technicians, and I hope they're not using it as such. It's just a bug that is there as of the latest iOS update.
All right. Next topic. Should we move on, or cool. Do you want to say anything further on that? No. Okay. Where are we? Where is the next topic? Implications of Touch ID in the screen. Right. So I've seen some rumors lately. iPhone 13 or whatever it ends up getting called. It's such a weird sounding name if it does get called iPhone 13. I'm just going to put that out there. But if it is called that and they don't move up to 20 or something like that, I've seen things that show that it might have Touch ID inside of the screen. I've also seen people saying, no, it's more likely to be inside the power button, because I think that's already a technology they're already putting into a side button inside the iPad, I think. And one of the new ones has that, possibly. Yeah. So you'd think they'd do that. I think that'd be cool. I'm all up for that as far as just a functional thing. But putting the Touch ID in the screen... what happens there when it comes to everything we've just been talking about? Does that mean now we replace a screen and we're now, instead of, it started with home button. Oh, sorry, the Touch ID is not going to work in this home button. We've replaced it. It went to Face ID, same sort of thing. And now we're going to tell people, we've replaced the screen, so now you can't actually use the Touch ID function any longer. Is that what's going to end up happening here?
So this is a really, really interesting one, and it's going to be these are just rumours for now, but these are rumours that are ongoing, and I mean the technology is there. So a couple of things. One is just to remind us how the Touch ID serialization works on previous models, and that is that each home button is uniquely paired to the logic board. If you swapped two original pulled buttons over, the Touch ID would be disabled because iOS didn't see the original button that it was looking for. Completely needless, but it's there. Now, if they followed this with an in-screen Touch ID, what that would indicate would be that if you replace the screen, the Touch ID in-screen would not function. Now, to actually evaluate this, we've got to look a little bit further than just the iPhone and in-screen Touch ID, because like classic Apple, they're a bit late to the party with in-screen Touch ID. Samsung have been doing it for years, and so have Huawei. So if we look at Huawei and Samsung and their implementations of in-screen Touch ID, there isn't just one way of doing it. There's two ways of doing it. So one way is to have it embedded into the OLED screen itself, so it's non-removable. That is what Samsung do with their flagships. So the S10 and up, they have it actually embedded into the back of the OLED screen. If you get some of the screen protectors, they have a hole cut out where the fingerprint bit is because it's right in the middle of the center of the screen. That's how Samsung do it. Samsung also have another way with the A models where it's a removable part on the inside of the phone, so you can remove it and you can move it over to the new. You can do what you want with it. And Huawei are the same. They can do the in-screen one, or they've got a removable one which moves over from one screen to the other. Now, up until recently, neither Samsung or Huawei, although the Touch ID sensors were serialized, they weren't using them in a way that would disable the in-screen fingerprint sensor if they were swapped. They worked absolutely fine. But they've started doing this now as well. Samsung has started doing it, and Huawei have started doing it. And the same as Apple, it's hidden behind a internet-connected calibration tool. It's the whole trifecta thing all over again. Now, Apple's main reason for doing Touch ID in this way is security and privacy. Now, this is really interesting because they're taking on a technology which has been around for years from other manufacturers that have sold them at scale. Samsung have sold millions of phones with this technology. And for them to be able to enforce this in the same way that they did previously, they'd need to say that there was a security and privacy issue for them to enforce it in this way. And for us to investigate that in any way, shape or form, all we have to do is look at Samsung and Huawei and look at the court cases, the kind of issues that they've had with security and privacy over the years by making this a replaceable part without affecting functionality. And there is none. There is none. So that would indicate that if Apple were to try and pair this in-screen Touch ID and use the excuse as safety and security, they'd have no actual factual basis for doing that. CTIA would have no actual proof and factual basis for doing that because we have years of evidence of other manufacturers doing exactly that and having no security and privacy issues whatsoever. So Apple would be doing it completely different to the other manufacturers, and they'd have actually no reason to do that for the end user.
That's it. That's interesting. So there'd be an overreach, and to try and tell people that it was just doing it because it was more secure would be a cop out, basically. Because it's not.
Someone would need to ask. It wouldn't be hard for a legislator or for even someone writing on a little blog just to look. Hang on a minute. Samsung have done this for years. Yeah. This is old tech. Where's all the reports of Samsung having security and privacy issues? Where's all the reports of Huawei having security and privacy issues? And I don't think that it's a coincidence that Samsung and Huawei have started doing this as we're nearing a real iPhone in-screen Touch ID launch. So I do think that Samsung and Huawei that are starting to do this is an indicator that the iPhone has it coming, and I think it's an indicator of where it's going to go. So when it does happen, or if it happens, all rumours, I really hope that the right people ask the right questions about what they're playing at, because the main loser in this is the end user who will be paying more for their repairs.
Okay, and on that note, let's move to the last one. Yeah, that's right. We saw something, I can't remember what article or what outlet I saw it in, but it was regarding France in particular. They've introduced some sort of repairability score. I don't know if this is who's compelled to do it. I just noticed something recently. You might know more about this topic, but it did look interesting. And it looked like something that could be, on the surface at least, something that's a positive movement for our industry.
Yeah, so being in the UK, we've left the EU now, but I believe I can't give you right now all the things that we're adopting, but we're adopting this basically. What this is, we're adopting. So anything that happens in the EU with this, we would adopt. So I've got a Mac Rumors post up on this. I'll just read it out. In November last year, the European Union voted to support a motion on the right to repair, including a system of mandatory labelling on consumer electronics to provide explicit information on the repairability and lifespan of the products. Laws compelling tech companies to display repairability scores for their devices, much like those in France, could come into effect across the entire EU as a result. And I'd imagine, as we're adopting this, it would have come across the entire EU and us in the UK as well, which would be great. However, being the ever skeptic that I am, before this was announced and before these went live on Apple's website, I did make the point that IRP is here in Europe, the Independent Repair Program, and everything that the repair score is looking for the repairability of devices is found inside the authorized program, which is what we touched on months ago when we did the previous episodes. So although the phones are hidden behind serialized calibration, that can be technically overcome by becoming authorized, as long as you tick all the boxes and you follow all the authorized rules. So for example, the iPhone 12 Pro has a score of 6 out of 10.
It's not high.
No, it's not high, but it's also not low. I mean, you've got to remember that when the iPhone 12 came out, although they fixed it now, you couldn't actually swap the cameras. How anything where you can't swap a component, how that gets a score of 6 out of 10, I don't know.
What I really want to know is there's so many ways to interpret the term repairability. Like, the first thing that comes to mind as someone who owns a repair shop is to think how easily I can disassemble and reassemble it, basically, more or less. But then maybe repairability is more the interpretation of how easily the access to repairs for consumers. So can I easily access a shop that will offer a bunch of repairs to this device, or can I not? And I guess what I'm fundamentally asking is, who's deciding what's repairable and what's not, and how are they actually coming to that conclusion anyway?
So I believe.
Do we know anything about that?
I believe, and I'm happy to be fact checked by a listener, but I believe the manufacturers are being left with a criteria, and then they're coming up with their own scores. I believe so. They've been given a criteria in testing, and then they're allowed to follow that. As long as they provide the information to prove that they've done it, then they give themselves their own scores. Now, this is a first step by the European Union, so I'm hoping that this gets expanded and this gets looked at, and I'm hoping that it gets interrogated further.
Well, isn't it interesting to think that you've got people who want their phones fixed, you've got OEM companies who produce phones, and you want some sort of group of independent people that know something about fixing phones, that have nothing to do, no vested interest in anything to do with selling or buying phones over and over and over again, that could possibly assist with deciding the repairability. If you're not picking up what I'm putting down, I'm saying it's the independent repair community. Yeah. They're the ones that should be consulted on how repairable the device is.
Yeah.
Because that's the most trustworthy source. In fact, the fact that they have a vested interest in selling repairs means that they're going to be more honest about how repairable the device is when they give it a score. And there's also, it's a very healthy competitive community. There's many small operators, small businesses in this community. So if you took all of that data and all of those people absolutely had nothing to do with each other, that is to say they're independent of each other, you would take all of those scores and then average it out, so to speak, in some simple way, and you would come to a much more accurate number, I think, than whatever this 6 out of 10 came from in the way that you just described. And that's there. We're all here. We're all ready to.
I would agree.
Give it a rating.
I'd agree 100%. 100% with you. But it is key to remember with this. So this is a first step by the European Union. It's a good step.
It's something.
It's something, and it could go one of two ways. Now, it could go that it just becomes a box ticking exercise for the manufacturers, and it's just a load of hoops for them to jump through to get a better score. Yeah. Or it could be interrogated. It could be pushed further. They could open up for dialogue with independent third-party
I will say, at least it's not 10 out of 10. At least it didn't come back saying 9 or 10 or some silly number.
6 isn't great, is it? I mean, 6 isn't. You wouldn't, as a consumer, look at that and think, "Oh, that's a really good repairability score." But at the same time,
it's also something that can be improved on. That's the nice thing about that. If another company wanted to do the same, they would go, right, well, now we have an interest in getting a 7 to beat our, and then on it goes, and hopefully they get more and more repairable.
Do you know what would be really interesting? It would be for a lesser-known manufacturer that had a good product, whether it was running Android or their own operating system, to build a phone with repair in mind at 10 out of 10. So it was a 10 out of 10 repair score. It ticked all the boxes, and it was stable. It didn't have to be all singing, all dancing, but it was stable. But to launch that and to see how that did compared to the main flagships, your main Samsungs, your leading Samsungs, your leading iPhones, your leading
Mm.
Huawei's, to see how that would sell compared. It would be really interesting to see how the consumers reacted to it, because this is the first
like it.
step of the European Union for making consumers aware of the repairability of their devices. And we've gone from, in the space of a decade, we've gone from phones costing, I remember I bought my first iPhone 2G for, it was £169, and it was probably the best made one they've ever done at that time.
Was it that cheap?
They sold
Was it
them off. They sold them off.
£169?
They sold them off cheap at the end. They had a deal with O2 and they sold them
Wow.
off cheap. And the last remaining, the 3G was coming, which was a plastic piece of crap, and they sold off all the remaining 2Gs for £169. You got no contract. No contract when you bought it. You just went in, bought it, and they sold off all their old stock like that. I wish I still had it sealed in the box now, but I don't. But yeah, they've gone from costing that, and even when they were costing new, they were like £300-400, I believe. To now, you're paying. I mean, we had an iPhone 12 mini come in, and I held it in my hand, and I said, that's the phone for me. That is the perfect size.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah, it is.
And then I thought, right, I'll just check how much it is. It's like, for 256 gig, I think it was £850. And I just I couldn't bring myself to spend nearly £1,000 on that. At least when you're getting like a bigger one, you're getting a bigger screen, but like the money is just... So the European Union are at a point now where they have to highlight this, because when you're spending this amount of money on products every 1 to 2 years, you need to think about the repairability of them, because the repair costs of them are 30-40% of the device. They're too expensive, so you can't ignore it for any longer. So it's really good to see that they've done this.
Have you heard any news in the EU of anyone? I know they like to do things like this to offer tax breaks for companies that that pollute less, etc. They have a certain quota they have to meet. I'm a free market guy, so I fundamentally don't necessarily love the idea of governments getting involved and deciding on how they can shape private businesses. But at the same time, it's worth exploring the idea of that happening. You know what I mean? If that's going to happen in a bunch of other industries, and it's going to happen at all to any degree, I do wonder whether they would be exploring that idea, and that would be a possible way forward.
So, question for you on that.
Yeah.
Apple, I believe they're going to be carbon neutral. Have you heard that?
No.
Apple commits to be 100% carbon neutral for its supply chain and products by 2030. Now, how carbon neutral is swapping out devices in store and then shipping them over on an aeroplane to China, or even a boat to China, having them refurbished, and then sending them all over the world to be re-swapped out again. How carbon neutral is that? It doesn't matter how many solar panels and crap that you put in your headquarters. That is not, like, you can't say that you're green and you're a unicorn and then have business practices.
What's greener than encouraging people to repair their phones?
Exactly.
That's
the answer.
Yeah.
Open up to us and you'll be carbon neutral well before 2030, because you won't have to be shipping them all over to China.
That's right. Exactly.
Simple.
That's right. On that note, should we wind it up? I think that's everything we need to discuss for the day. We've hit almost an hour now. I really enjoyed that. Yeah, I know, right? And we don't want to bore anyone. And if anyone's still hanging around and listening, then you've now become our favourite people in the world. So thanks for hanging around with us. Is there anything else you want to add before we sign off?
All good. I can't believe that's been an hour. Tim, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you again. I look forward to doing it again soon.
All right, let's do it sooner rather than later, Ricky.
Take care, mate.
Thanks, mate. See ya.